I think One Nation's been the only consistent political party for the last 20 years.
They're not talking about you. All right, well, let me tell you, One Nation is talking about you.
It's like the media's run away from One Nation. They're too scared to ask us any questions, mainly because we're straight talkers and we've got the answers.
This is like a call to arms. You guys need to start making the real decisions and who you're going to vote for.
Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome back to episode 6 of the ExCandidates. My name is Stephen Tripp and I'm joined by...
Moringa Warrior.
My hecklers already. Joined by Rebecca Thompson and Adam Zahra. How you going, guys?
Very
Good. How are you,
Stephen?
Steve?
How are you?
Not bad. And tonight should be a very interesting episode, I feel, because the man that we have on is a pretty interesting character. He's kind of had his hands in a number of different pies. He's the man behind the Major's Last website that was active in the lead up to the election. He's also been an ex-candidate. He's one of us guys, an ex-candidate for the Australian Conservatives in the New South Wales State election in 2019. And he's also got a climate change book coming out soon that we'd love to hear about. So his name is Jeff Grimshaw. How you going, Jeff?
Good, thanks. How are you guys? Good?
Yeah, everything's
very
going
good, Jeff.
well.
Good to see you.
Likewise. Sorry, it's a bit dark in here. I just got an email today from AGL saying, I don't know if you all got it as well, saying that power prices are going up. Again, 20%. Thanks, Teals.
Well,
Yeah.
is it another 20%,
Another
or
20
on
in
top of the
August.
17%?
Yeah.
So that's 37% in what? In two quarters.
Yeah, about 6 months. Yeah.
It's okay because Zali's going to put all the windmills on Warringah, along Warringah, along the beach here and along Mossman. So he'll sort things out soon.
All will be good in the world.
Yes.
I've got a better idea, actually. I think a great One Nation policy for the New South Wales state election should be that when the power cuts happen and when the blackouts happen, what usually happens is you have rolling blackouts. So they cut off certain suburbs at a time for about 2 hours. What should happen is when supply is greater than demand, the first suburbs that are cut off should be Warringah, Wentworth, and is it North Sydney that elected a Steele candidate as well? And,
North Sydney. Yeah.
So those three electorates should be cut off first. Sorry, Stephen.
McKellar.
McKellar as well. Yeah, so that's pretty much the Northern Beaches blacked out. And then down in Victoria, Kooyong and whatever Bant's seat is, and basically wherever the Steeles and the Greens, those Queensland inner city seats, they should be cut off first before anybody else.
That would probably alleviate the power crisis in itself.
Absolutely, because they probably use 5 times more energy than most of us do anyway.
Well, with all their fancy home hubs and all their homes would be electrified and all the cameras and all the computers and PCs and phones.
Yeah. So there's the first One Nation policy for New South Wales state election and Victoria state election.
Or we should just go, straight to it and go nuclear.
It still takes 10 years to build those things. These power cuts are going to be with us for a long time. You can't just flick a switch and flick it all back on again. I mean, obviously you can flick a switch and turn the lights on, but you can't flick a switch and start producing electricity again after you've shut down coal-fired power stations.
Yeah.
Well, they don't just turn them off; they blow them up here.
Yeah, blow them up. Yeah.
So you can't, you just can't be like England and Germany and just say, "Hey, let's start them up again."
Yep. And the ones that we still have are in a state of disrepair.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're constantly having to shut down generators because they can't run them and they're having to be repaired. So this is going to be with us for a long time. So I say we cut off the seats that voted for the Steeles and the Greens first.
Yep.
Why should we?
Well, since we're on the topic, do you want to tell us about your book that's coming out soon?
Oh yeah. So I've got this book. It's called Trigger Warming. Everything you wanted to know about global warming, but we're afraid to ask. I'm hoping to have it released next week. I'm just waiting for one person to give me a reference for the back of the book. I've already got one reference from Will Happer, Professor Will Happer. If you don't know who he is, he's probably the world's greatest leading living physicist. So that's nice.
That's really good.
It's a nice short book. It's about 180 pages long, and it's really written. A lot of climate change books, global warming books, are, you know, they're written by professors, and I love them. I think they're great. I'm just in the middle of this Ian Plimer's book, Green Murder, but it's this big, and the average person doesn't have the time or the inclination to read something that big. So I made something this big, which just sort of covers, I wouldn't say it's not just the basics, but it covers enough so that you have enough knowledge to be able to rebut and fight back against the alarmists. And it's nice and colourful, so we've got nice colour pictures in there, and charts and diagrams, and Greta, of course. This also is the only global warming book with Victoria's Secrets models in it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
I was going to buy it now.
Where can we buy it?
Adam,
I was gonna buy it anyway. I was gonna say, you've got your first purchase right here, because I want to read it, and that'd be a really good introduction, I'm sure, to the climate change
We'll buy 10
world.
copies.
Apart from
no, it's really good. I think the thing I'm most proud of is the infographics I made. I actually made these myself. So there's this one. There's quite a few of these infographics, and this one's an infographic of the global thermostat as it is, which basically shows that if you turn the temperature down a few notches, we're in an ice age. If you turn it up a few notches, nothing happens. We're fine. We're actually better off with it being warmer. Not that that's going to happen anyway, because CO2 is not the control dial of the Earth. So if you look at this dial here, we're there at about 400 parts per million, which most people, you ask most greenies how much CO2 is in the atmosphere, they couldn't answer you. They couldn't tell you the percentage or the parts per million.
No, they can't, because I asked them.
Yeah, I ask people all the time. They have no clue. But what that shows basically is that if we turn it down, if we halve CO2, we're in the death zone. That means that everything dies, not just humans, but all plants, all animals, everything dies. But you can double CO2, nothing happens. Like if we double it, we've had ice ages at 10 times the current rate of CO2. So over here, the Andean Saharan ice age at 4,000 parts per million, and it was an ice age. You go up to sort of 5, 6, 7, 8,000 parts per million. That's when all of the food crops developed. It was the period, the Cambrian explosion, which is when all life on Earth developed. So all you have to do is show this chart to this dial to greenies and say, show me where the problem is with CO2. And they can't answer you. They look at it, they're gobsmacked. They're like, what? What's going on? You know, because they're taught that, you know, if we just increase CO2 a little bit, we're all going to fry and die.
We've only got 12 years left, right?
Yeah. Is it 10 now?
Well, it should be 10 now, but I think it's locked at 12.
Yeah.
I actually thought we were living on borrowed time. Weren't we meant to have died like 10 years ago?
Yeah, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we had 5 years, and 15 years ago, we had 3 years, and 10 years ago, we had 2 years, and 5 years ago, they just keep moving the goalposts back and back, or forward and forward, and saying, oh, yeah, we're going to die. And they just assume most people are idiots, which unfortunately most people are, because they can't remember the last time they were told.
Hi, viewers.
Not our viewers.
Not our viewers. We're just not our viewers. We're just mucking around. So all good.
So where can they? Is there any information online that we can find about this?
So if you go onto Amazon next week and you just look up trigger warming and my name, Jeff Grimshaw, you should be able to find it. I haven't got a link for it yet because I'm still processing and uploading and everything. I actually finished this book about 2 years ago, and we were going to release it, and then COVID happened. And I said to sort of my co-author, I said, well, let's not release this until we can actually have a book launch. This was sort of at the beginning of COVID. We were thinking, okay, well, this will be sort of by July or October of 2020. 2 years later, we've literally only just come out of lockdown, and I'm still sitting on this book trying to release it.
Yeah, but what a better time. We've just had all these teals elected. So.
Exactly. It's a perfect time, and we're heading into a real power crisis as well. And this explains everything about why renewable energy doesn't work, why it's not environmentally friendly, why all of this is being done. I'll just flip back to one of my other pictures, which is my favorite picture, which is the amount of money that's being spent on climate change or every single year. It amounts to about 1.5 trillion with a T dollars. Now, if you look at that chart, that thing that looks like a skyscraper, so you probably can't see the blocks.
Yeah, I can see it,
each one of those blocks is one of these. It's a whole pile of money. So $1.5 trillion, which would cover about 1.5 soccer fields. That is how much money is being spent globally on this gigantic fraud. Now, if you look at the bottom here, you've got in red, that's the profits of Exxon, the big polluting evil oil company. And then in blue or grey there, you've got Apple at about $60 billion. They're the most profitable company in the world. And this blue part here, that's the entire cost of the Apollo space program. Not just the moon landing, but all 6 moon landings or 6 moon missions. I think it's 7 missions and 6 landings. All of the rockets, all of the research, the entire Apollo program, 10-year program, cost this much.
Wow.
So we are spending...
Figure there just for people that are not watching the video?
Sorry?
Do you have a figure that you could just read out for people that...
Yeah, so the entire Apollo program, and this is in today's money, so this is adjusted for inflation. The entire Apollo program cost the equivalent of $150 billion. And that's today's money. And we're spending 1.5 trillion. So if you can do your maths, that's the equivalent of 10 Apollo programs every single year. Now that would be the equivalent of sending a manned moon mission every 2 or 3 days. Can you imagine if we were landing man on the moon every 2 or 3 days? Can you imagine the uproar and the people saying, why are you wasting so much money? Yeah. That's what we're spending on this fraud. And where's all this money going? It's going to billionaires and spivs and politicians and their mates.
Is this what it's all about? Like, you know, if it's not the climate, is it about? I mean, one hand you've got all these different treaties that are basically laying the building blocks for global government, and then the next breath you've got all these subsidies going to the pockets of people like Simon Holmes à Court and people invested in renewables that are going to make a killing just out of taxpayer-funded subsidies.
Yeah, they haven't invested in renewables though. What they've done is, well, they have in a certain sense. What they've done is they put a bit of money in, and through the steals, and I call them the steals, not the teals, because they steal with and you spell it not with an S but with a $sign on either end. Steals, because they steal other people's money. So they take taxpayers' money, they put it into the bucket of investment that the double-barreled bankers have invested in, and they can't lose. Their investments go up and up and up because it's guaranteed by taxpayers' money that they can take at any time from our pockets and effectively put into their bucket, that they will always win. They will become even richer. And they're just like one example. Like there's lots of examples of this all around the world of spivs and thieves stealing our money via the government to enrich themselves, all on the back of this gigantic fraud. And that's just one aspect.
And they use fear to do it, and they direct that fear at children. So one of the things that Zahra Stegel was doing in my electorate was handing out flyers at the playground to children, and children were running up to their parents going, "Vote for this woman, vote for this woman." I just don't think that's right.
It's child abuse. It's brainwashing, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. I mean, there's all these people go on about having, oh, we want to get rid of school chaplaincy programs and we want to get rid of a religion in schools. What about your cult? Your cult of green alarmism and your cult of child grooming. How about we get rid of that?
Yep. Because that's what we've talked about that a few times about the indoctrination. We're actually, I'm trying to get some people trying to start to contact some teachers and things like that to try and get a little bit more information before we start really hitting that target, that topic. But I can tell from actually speaking to my own children who go to schools. So I put them to Catholic schools because that's our family values. And I was hoping that they might miss out a little bit of the indoctrination, but they just do it in a weaker form over a longer period of time. Instead of having, just for argument's sake, a gender fluidity class straight up, they just don't do it like that. They just slowly work it through the system. Then with climate change, my kids are always on about, plastic this and plastic that. And I said, but plastic is a byproduct of petroleum. And I said, they're going to make it anyway. And I said, why would we have to cut down trees so we can drink our Macca's Coke from a paper straw when we know that trees create oxygen for us? It's kind of like, I don't understand the whole point of clear cut to save. It doesn't make sense to me.
And you know what the hilarious thing is? Now we're told we got to ban plastic bags and you can't have single-use plastic bags. I remember when I was a kid, they were banning paper bags.
Yeah. Because they were cutting down too many trees.
Yeah. Oh, you're cutting down too many trees. You can't have paper bags anymore. We're going to have plastic now, 20 years later or 30 years later, whatever it might be. Oh, we can't have plastic bags. We've got to have these recycled, paper bags now, blah, blah, blah. It's just, and it's the same thing with the climate. First it was, global cooling and we're going to have an ice age. Now it's, then it was global warming. Now it's climate change, which seems to be applicable for everything.
Yeah.
And my son's school, he's in kindergarten. They just made a rule pretty much overnight that they have to bring a reusable cup. So having 4 to 5 year olds have that responsibility, I mean, it's full on. Anyways, you accept it and you go out there and you try and find an appropriate cup that they can have a hot drink in that's not going to be spilled all over them.
Imagine how grubby those cups are going to get.
Yeah.
The issue I had was the fact that they didn't even give a transition period. So literally the next day, children were going up to get a hot chocolate or something in a cold morning. Oh, no, sorry, we don't have cups anymore. You didn't bring your own keep cup, so you can't have one. These are like little children. So it's just getting out of hand.
Yeah, that's child abuse. That's a form of punishment. Oh, you've been naughty. You've sinned against the environment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But really, it's up to the parents, and we just hadn't had an opportunity to run out and get an appropriate cup at the time. So I don't see why the child should have to wear it.
And the great irony about paper straws and how you get wooden knives and forks nowadays is that we have more trees than ever. Like we have more trees than we did 100 years ago. We have more trees than we did 200 years ago. Because what used to happen before coal, oil and gas, before fossil fuels is, what did people used to heat and cook? Wood. So they cut down trees. And now we're going back to that. It's like this cycle of stupidity. They burn wood pellets to try and save the environment. They cut down trees in America, South America, and they make wood pellets out of them, and they ship them on a ship using fossil fuels all the way to England to burn in these gigantic furnaces. And
is that to boil the water to turn the turbines for steam and stuff like that?
Yeah.
What?
You ask the average greenie, where does coal come from? Well, they'll probably say the ground, but you'll say, but what was it made out of? They don't know. And when you tell them it's actually, it's old plants and old trees that's being compressed with time and heat into this very dense form of energy. So it's effectively renewable and solar energy. Yeah. It's concentrated solar energy. And it burns, it's got a much higher BTU, i.e. you can get more power out of it than you can out of chopping down a tree. and drying the wood and burning the wood in a wooden stove. So why wouldn't you use coal? Why you think you're saving the environment by using wood? Idiots.
Yeah,
Not that there's
I
anything
agree with
to save
you.
anyway. I mean, there's no problem with CO2.
Yeah, because funnily enough, because CO2 is natural, and the Earth can actually absorb CO2 and filter it, and as it does.
Yeah.
So it's just a natural product that is used, i.e., to make food. So it doesn't seem to be such a bad thing to me.
Yeah, it's plant food. If we doubled our CO2 now, our food would be a damn sight cheaper. That's about the only effect of the CO2 would be. We can feed out the whole world right now anyway. We have enough food. We make enough food for 12 billion people, but it's badly distributed, which is why people go hungry. But if we doubled CO2, we would have so much more food, so much more crops. It would be, ironically, it would be much greener than it is today. I mean, if you're Greens, you want more CO2, don't you? You want it to be greener, yeah?
Yeah.
But if there's all these crazy ideas about sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere and trying to sequester it in the ground, that's a death sentence for everybody. That sounds like some James Bond villain super deadly weapon. You couldn't kill more people, or not just people, but life on Earth, than by removing all of the CO2.
I wish I saved a post that I saw actually, and I just didn't save it because I was actually working and I glanced it over. And there is a country that is building a machine that will carbon capture, will pull the carbon out of the air. I'm not sure the details on it, but I have seen that, and I'm like, mate, that's kind of like, you're right. That is like from James Bond.
It's probably got some bald-headed person with a white furry cat in the background behind
Schwab.
Mr. Schwab.
Yeah.
Oh,
Stavros Schwab.
Yeah.
What led you to write this book? What was your main motivation? Like, when did the light bulb go off above your head to say, I'm going to write a book on climate change?
When the Steels got in, that's when the light bulb went out.
No, it was actually started by a friend of mine called Rafe Champion. He's very appropriately named because he's a champion.
That's funny. I'm going to have a conversation with him this weekend. Actually.
Oh, perfect. Excellent.
Yeah, he runs. What's the? I forgot the name of his group that he runs in 5doc.
Climate Realism 5doc.
That's it.
Yeah, I'm part of that as well.
Okay.
I'm one of them. I just like Rafe started the book out, and he sort of wrote 2 or 3 chapters and said, can you help me edit it? So I started editing it, and then I said, maybe we should add a chapter on this, and maybe we should add some pictures, and maybe we should add some diagrams. And eventually I'd sort of ended up writing 3/4 of the book, and he said, you've written most of the book, and you should maybe take it over now. And his motivation of mine as well was because we just wanted something simple that was easy to read. Didn't take up too much. You didn't have to concentrate too much. Just the simple facts with simple explanations, nice simple diagrams. Make it a bit fun. So all of the chapters are named after movies. So one of the chapters is about renewable energy is Gone with the Wind. And the chapter on CO2 is called The Phantom Menace because it's a phantom menace. It's not a menace at all. So there's a little bit of lightheartedness in there, and so it's fun to read because you want to entertain. That's one of the things that Conservatives can't do very well. Is we're not very good at the sort of we're very facts based. We like to do facts and figures and charts and diagrams, and there's a few of those in there, but you want to entertain people. You want to keep things simple enough, and like diagrams of a CO2 dial or a temperature dial that you can just look at and just absorb really quickly and show to people and go, hey, if CO2 is a problem, explain this. Hey, do you want it to be warmer? Do you want it to be colder? Hey, did you know that you're breathing in CO2 that's 2 or 3 times the outside levels when you're indoors, when you're in a classroom, or when you're in a bus, or when you're in an airplane, it's like 4 or 5 times that. Most people don't know these facts. They think, oh my God, CO2 is a poison. If we increase it, we're all going to die. And he's just like,
But the thing is, you breathe it out.
yeah.
So
It's
how is
exhaust.
it a poison? How is it
Yeah.
a poison? That's what I don't. That's you know. I've been onto this for ages as well, and I'm kind of like, you know, I'm just not over it, but it's just like
Well,
pick something else. I mean,
that's one of the things to say to people is to say, when they want to get rid of CO2 emissions, they mean you.
yeah,
Because you're not just a user, but you emit CO2.
yeah,
You know, I don't know if you've seen in New Zealand, they've started putting bags on cows' bums and mouths to try and stop flatulence from methane, which again is not a threat. It's a greenhouse gas, but it's more potent than CO2, but it's in such tiny quantities that it has no effect on temperature at the current levels that it is.
I'm sure that if humans or all animals emit methane, even I'm sure that if we researched it, you would find that methane goes into the atmosphere and then does something and then breaks down naturally through natural environment anyway. I mean, I haven't done any research on it, but it's natural, and the Earth is natural, so it should be able to handle itself.
Yep. I mean, the biggest carbon source or emitters on the planet, it's not humans, it's actually insects. So I guess one of the ways they can mitigate that is by getting us to all eat insects, maybe.
Yeah, we'll eat the insects. We'll throw another cockroach on the barbie.
Yeah, because we won't be allowed to eat meat, and there won't be enough food. So yeah, we'll eat the insects and reduce carbon pollution.
Surely we can't let it get to that point. Like, this has to be something that we.
Yeah, but they're indoctrinating the kids. See, they've attacked the children. Yeah. So it used to people like I think they probably started doing it around when I was at school, but it was only very minor and kind of like skimmed over our heads, kind of thing. But now our children are really into it. Like
people are putting masks on again, so it's not hard to persuade the majority. Unfortunately, it's just they just believe absolutely everything. It just it's ridiculous.
They haven't been taught critical thinking. Schools no longer teach how to think; they teach you what to think. In other words, they indoctrinate you. And one of the outcomes of that we've seen was in the last election, where the Greens votes went up 5%, and the Steels got in, and it was all the young people doing that. So they're probably the first generation that's come through that's been entirely indoctrinated from age 4 all the way through to 18. On global warming crap and everything else with it.
I agree. That's what I observed. Like, you know, straight away that percentage is probably the 18 to 21-year-olds that are voting for the first time.
Yep. And sorry, go on.
No, you're right. I was going to say that's a good. Sorry about that. You go. You're the guest. Go for it, Jeff.
No, I forgot what I was going to say now.
Well, I was going to say it's a good way to segue into Major's Last. Did you see any of that happen when people were? Was there any analytical information behind the scenes that you had from people using the how to vote card system?
Yeah, so we had about 250,000 people downloading how to vote cards from Major's Last. We also estimate there was probably that same number again from people who they didn't download a how to vote card, but they just had it on their phone, and they either did it on the day and just had it on their phone, and we can tell that from the sort of number of visitors and the bandwidth and so on. And that also includes there are quite a lot of people and groups who actually went out and they made how to vote cards using Major's Last, and then printed out 1,000 or 10,000 and handed them out around their neighborhoods or outside the booths themselves. So it's 500,000, quarter to 500,000 was really good. Sounds like a lot, but unfortunately there's 17 million voters out there, so it's a drop in the ocean. But considering where we started and how little money we had, we did this for less than $20,000. The total cost of it was about $20,000 and we raised about $19,995. So
Oh wow.
Don't you know if it was? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go on, Rebecca.
I was going to ask. So was it as successful as you'd hoped, or more so?
It was. We kind of hoped it would be more so. The problem was because we were constantly having to chase funds, and we started quite late because there was a lot of discussion and debate about how it should be done, because certain people wanted it to be okay, Majors last, but it has to be Liberals third last and Labour second last and Greens last.
Yeah.
And I said, but there's a whole bunch of disgruntled Labour and Greens voters out there who want to put minor parties first, but there is no way in hell that they would put the Liberals above Labour or the Greens. So you have to give them the option of being able to say, okay, Majors last, but I want to vote Labour third last, and then Liberals and then Greens, or whatever combination of that there was. I thought it was a much better way to do it than static how to vote cards. So every election, every group says, oh, I know the best way to vote, and they put out this one static how to vote card. And one of the sort of key reasons I did Majors last was to make people realize that it's their vote and it's their choice. When somebody gives you a static how to vote card with their numbers in there, you're sort of voting their way. But if you actually sit there, and one of the other sort of factors with Majors last was it actually made voting fun. A lot of people contacted us and said, this is such an amazing tool. It's made it so much more fun to vote, exciting. I have to, go and look at all of these different parties. So it was to make it exciting to vote. It was to almost cajole people into going out and researching the minor parties, and to really think about their vote and realize it's their vote and they have control over it. The only minor thing we were asking is to put the Majors last, because we wanted to get rid of all of them because they're all corrupt, totalitarian.
Yeah.
And do you think you'll continue Majors last again at future elections, Jeff?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely do it for the next federal election, assuming I haven't been arrested and thrown in jail. At the state elections, it's a little bit different because some state elections are optional preferential voting, but we're going to look at a way that we can still do it for the state elections, because it was, if we'd had a bit more money and we did go and we tried to get some from Clive, just asking for the price of one of his billboards that was vandalized. That would have really helped, but because we just got so caught up with trying to raise money and everything, all the other things we had to do. It was such a small team with very little time, all working for no money, all working on their own sweat and their own dime and everything, that it was really difficult to get it to where we wanted it to be. And we had a lot of help from some of the other groups, like Reignite Democracy, and Malcolm Roberts was absolutely fantastic with it. He signed off most of his Facebook posts would put the Majors last. The actual phrase just became a phrase in itself, and people were using its hashtags. There are even some guys down in Melbourne. I never met them. I don't know them, but they're driving this van around with the website on the side. The enthusiasm behind it was amazing, and the people supporting it were amazing, and all the donors were amazing. And thanks to all of those, if any of them are listening, and all of the people who supported it. So yeah, we'll definitely do it again, because it was great. We had a little bit of publicity. If we'd had a little bit more, it would have been really, really effective.
Well, that's the main thing. You have to keep things going. You can't expect to rock up in one election and set the world on fire. It's a slow build. If you look at history and how political parties kind of how they track, from their beginnings, they don't always win straight away. It takes, it's a slow progression. This might be a bit of a difficult question, but based on analytics, There's a lot of people talking about conspiracy theories with voter fraud and things like that. I don't subscribe to all of them, but from your analytics, is there any way that you can kind of compare the volume and the traffic on your website compared to the actual vote of the election?
No, not yet. And do you know why? It's because the election counts haven't been finished.
Okay.
So we've got nothing to compare it to because they haven't finished. Very few people realise this, that they haven't counted the lower house properly yet. They haven't done the full distribution of preferences. If you go on the AEC website and look at the tally room, they've only done the two-party preferred count. They haven't done the full distribution of preferences. So we can't see where the preferences went. So, we've got, there's no data there to look at and analyse and be able to say what happened. But yeah, on the whole, look, there was definitely shenanigans in this. There's shenanigans in every election. It's not unusual, but it's usually a few hundred or a few thousand in marginal seats where they get fake voters to register, or and it's usually on the left. It's usually the left doing it, and they'll vote multiple times just to sort of flip a marginal seat. But the kind of stuff that was coming out was pretty shocking, but it mostly had to do with advice coming from the AEC themselves, saying, "Oh no, you can't, don't vote for these candidates," and all of this stuff was caught on tape. People recorded it, and I don't know, Clive's doing some kind of lawsuit. But at the end of the day, what will happen is the AEC will come out and say, "Look, some of our staff weren't trained properly, and we'll fix it next time." But that's not good enough. It's not good enough. So what we need to do next time, and this is Victoria, New South Wales, we need to catch them out at it whilst they're doing it. So phone them up, ask them questions, record it, record when you go into the booth. If you've got I don't know if you're allowed to, but record it. But if you can get a secret camera or whatever.
Yeah, well, the AEC guy that I was speaking to told me that when voting for the Senate, you can only vote up to 6, and if you go beyond that, it's an informal vote. And that's plain. It even says it on the ballot that's wrong. You can go past, at least 6, and then you keep going. And I had to say, "Excuse me, can you explain that again?" And he, I was playing dumb, but
yes.
And he's like, "No. If you go to 6, if you go to 7, it's an informal vote." What I don't know if they're just volunteers or they work there, but surely it must be drummed into them the exact.
They're trained. They have training before they do this. They have hours and hours and hours of training. So this is what we need to do next time: is catch them out, get them on video, get them on recordings, and yes, I'm going to make this public to everybody, because we need to tell the AEC, hey, we're watching you. We're going to be Big Brother now. Not the government. We're watching you, and we're going to hold you to account. And if you find people giving you false information, AEC workers, then you demand that that AEC worker is fired, that they never work for the AEC again, and that the person who trained them is fired, and they never work for the AEC again. Put the fear of God into them.
Something very off about the staff of the AEC this year, like my own personal experience doing pre-poll. Just the way that the minor parties or the more conservative party volunteers were being treated, and I witnessed. It was just unbelievable, honestly. There were certain rules, as most of you would know. We can't wear our colours into the building if we need to use the bathroom or whatever. That was obviously enforced on One Nation, United Australia Party, and any other conservative. But the Greens, Labor, and the Green Independent running in my electorate, the volunteers walking in and out whenever they felt like it.
Charlie Steggall was standing at the front entrance, welcoming people in.
Yeah.
Well behind the line.
Not honouring that 6-metre rule.
No, she was standing right at the door.
We had a woman constantly coming out and drawing on the pavement with chalk, and she even had the audacity to tell Mark Latham, who was there with me at pre-poll, to take a step back from the line of chalk. It was truly unbelievable.
Yeah, most of the AEC workers are lefties.
It was very evident this year, I believe.
But,
yes.
Catch them out. I had one AEC worker who thought she was saying something rude about me because I was scrutineering and I needed to get. I was trying to find one of the candidates. Eventually, got the UAP candidate to do it, and she thought she was being rude. She thought she was saying this under her breath, and I don't know. She called me a dumb yellow hat or something like that. So I've got a name, and I'm putting a complaint into the AC. If I ever see her working there again, I'll make sure that the AC are in trouble for it, because you're supposed to be. You're not supposed to be partisan. And of course, she was a lefty.
Impartial.
Yeah, you're supposed to be impartial. So catch these people out, make sure they never work for the AC again, and they never work at elections again. And we make sure that the AEC and the workers know about it. We will catch you doing this, and you will never work at the AEC again. And if you're found out to be lying to people, we'll also contact your employer and tell you that you've been thrown out of the AEC for being partisan.
Now, Jeff, we've heard from a little birdie that we have that you conceived the Put the Majors Last idea and website in a conversation you had with Australia One media liaison and a ride back from Eden Monero by-election. What was your experience with that? And I heard that we also heard that later on you proposed that to the Australian One executive that they should form an alliance with the minor parties, and that got you in a bit of hot water. Is that right?
Yeah, there's some truths and half stories in there.
Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe, but
yeah, look, the Major's Last idea I've had for quite a few years. It's been forming for a few years, and it actually came from Climate Realist of 5doc, because for the 2013 and 2016 election, they had a website called Conservative Revolt, where they just made static PDF how to vote cards for every electorate. You just went there and you downloaded them, and they were doing that based on politicians who were sort of against the global warming hysteria. So that's sort of where the inspiration came from, was from my friends at Climate Realist of 5doc. But I wanted, because I'm an IT person, I wanted to make it interactive, and I sort of had an idea how to do it and how to, so that you could move the votes up and down. I think that's probably where the idea initially came from, and this time around I thought this is a great chance to try it. We'll see if we can get some money together for it and try it and do it, build it. So yeah, it's something that's sort of been brewing in the back of my mind. The actual idea to put the Majors Last really solidified in the last 2 years because of COVID, and because all of the parties were effectively the same. The Liberals were slightly less worse than the Labours. I doubt this much. Yeah, like we weren't thumped senseless, and there wasn't blood running in the streets like there was in Melbourne. But it wasn't that much better here. We had ridiculously long lockdowns, and all for nothing. Just a little segue here. So COVID was about an invisible, apparently deadly threat in the air that was going to kill us all, and that computer models said would kill millions and millions of people, and that in order to save us from it, we had to hand over all of our money and our rights to the government. How is that any different to global warming? A deadly invisible threat in the air that's going to kill us all according to faulty computer models, and in order to save us from it, we need to hand over all our power and money to big government and international organizations.
And the vaccine was going to end the pandemic, but now we're hearing today that we've got a third wave coming.
Well, what's the third wave? It's flu. It's flu season.
Yeah.
And it's with no immune systems because they took the jab.
I read it was something called Disease X. Is that the one that you're talking about? It's like straight out of X-Men. Like, honestly, it's called Disease X or something. I just read it. So people don't think I research, but I do research. It's just here and there. So what happens is I read it, and then I've got to try and go back and find it to try and get right back into it and get more research on it. But apparently it's something called disease X, which nicely folds into all the side effects or adverse reactions from the, so that's disease X apparently, or that's what I've been reading into so far.
Disease X. What does the
Can't
X
keep
stand
up
for?
with it. I can't keep up with it. I'm still stuck back on monkeypox.
It's like
it
we're
sounds
living
like
in
a
a bad
breakfast.
Hollywood movie.
Yeah,
So
a
I sort of
Hollywood
keep
nightmare that just
expecting
won't
to be
end.
walking. I'm expecting to be walking along the street one day and just sort of bump into a wall where the clouds are painted on, and then you find, like in the Truman Show, and it's like,
Yeah,
oh, this has been a joke all along, hasn't it?
yeah.
The first time I spoke to you, you were telling me about how you did the analytics on the PCR tests. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. So I was working in the main coronavirus hospital in New South Wales during the pandemic, and I was an analyst. So I helped design the reporting system for the COVID test. And the first week that the results were coming out, one of my colleagues sent me an email and said, sorry, take a step back. What happened if any of you had a COVID test was you'd have a COVID test and about 24 to 48 hours later, you get the results. If you were negative, you would get a text saying you were negative, but keep monitoring for a symptom, something like that. If you were positive, you got a phone call and you would, sort of said, oh, are you sick? Stay indoors, self-isolate for 2 weeks, call us if you have any problems, come into hospital if you get really sick. Most people weren't sick, never even got sick. So what happened with the test was we had to get all of the test results and then provide them to the call center. And one day my colleague sends me an email and goes, what are we going to do with this person? And this person, quite a few people were having multiple tests for various reasons. They're either hypochondriacs, or they would just go in and get tested every day. Or the other one was in the hospitals, they were testing the patients in the hospital. Just doesn't matter what they were there for, whether it was like, liver transplant, broken leg, ingrown toenail, whatever. They were testing them for COVID every day or every other day. So there were lots of patients who were being tested multiple times. And there was this one patient, and they were positive on a Monday. They'd have a test on the Wednesday and they were negative, and they were positive again a day later. And I was like, that's weird. Can you send me all the data that you have? So I got all of the spreadsheets, all of the data, all of the test results, tens of thousands of them, did an analysis on it, and found that my very, very conservative estimate was that the test was 80% faulty, because there were all these people who were being tested multiple times who were having these bizarre results where I won't say they had COVID, they tested positive for COVID on Monday. Tuesday it had a day off. Wednesday it suddenly reappeared. Thursday it had another day off, and then they had it again on Friday. And
Can you just say that again, because I think that's very important. 80%, the PCR test is 80% faulty.
Well, that was I was erring on the side of the test. And this was before I'd heard anything about it. This was back in March 2020. And this, about a month or two later, suddenly all these other international doctors were coming out going, yeah, this test doesn't work. It's 90% faulty. It's 98% faulty. So I was erring on the side of the caution, because there were some people who'd have two tests, and there were two positive tests, but they might have been tested the next day and they'd be negative. But the other thing was, got another colleague to look up their medical to see if these people had been admitted. None of them had been admitted. So there were all these people testing positive, and they weren't sick. There was nothing wrong with them. So it was just something where they were doing this test, and I didn't know anything about PCR tests. I know I researched it later. I didn't even know what PCR stood for at the time, so I didn't really know what was going on. I had to call up some friends and say, "How does this rotogene thing work? Or what happens?" And they explained everything. I did my own research on the internet. But this test was just, all I knew was that it wasn't working. I was like, if this was a pregnancy test, would you trust, or a cancer test even? would you trust a test where it was 80% potentially faulty? And
Not only that, we're basing all our
down on the basis of these tests.
plus all the taxpayers' money that they're putting into it, which is, they're taking a massive loan out and going into deficit to pay for, which our children and grandchildren beyond will pay off, all based on this faulty test.
Yep, we destroyed an economy, and we destroyed the lives of children, and we destroyed small businesses, and we put ourselves into massive debt, all because of a faulty test. That they couldn't even be bothered to check whether it was a legitimate test or not. And they knew it was faulty. I provided them with the information. They knew it was faulty, and they ignored me.
Well, without that, there was no fear. Without the faulty test and all the false results, there was no pandemic. There was no fear.
Yep. And did you notice how the news, they only ever reported cases? They never reported how many people were actually in hospital. Do you know why? Because the hospitals were empty. The hospital was empty.
They were, because they had enough time to do TikTok dances, and they were all running around and having like quiet nights. So I know from people, like from constituents I've spoken to, okay, that they had people come in and out just like normal, but they also had, it was a lot quieter. Well, from what I heard, the hospital was reasonably a bit quieter. I've never verified it.
Yeah, it was the quietest I've ever seen the hospital. And there were a couple of patients in there who tested positive for COVID, and there were one or two who died, but they were like 91 and 89, and they had comorbidities. But it was just unbelievable. There's like almost the entire world thought there was this pandemic was going on, and no such thing was happening in the hospital. And that is, of course, why they didn't allow cameras into the hospital, or cameras anywhere near the hospital, because it was empty. There was nothing was going on. We shut off 2 wards in anticipation of all these COVID patients coming in, and nobody went into those wards, and they had to reopen them again as regular wards. They laid off casual nurses because they didn't need them. So everyone was thinking that there was people filling up the hospitals. They weren't. It was for most of 2020. Sorry, the hospital was empty. And how many people died that year? I think it was off the top of my head, doing the figures off the top of my head, was about 900.
8,000. Oh, sorry.
No, 900 people.
I thought you meant total.
No, in Australia.
Yeah.
About 900 people. I think it was 909 or 989. People died with COVID in 2020. To put that into perspective, in 2017, 4,500 people died of influenza and pneumonia. 4,500. 2020, we had 909. And 800 of those people who died were in Victorian aged care facilities, because Dan Andrews, socialist mass murderer that he is, just like all socialists, put sick people into aged care facilities. Now, it doesn't matter what virus you have. If you put, even if it's a regular flu virus, if you put sick people into aged care facilities, it will spread like wildfire and people will die. Yeah. So out of that 900, that's less than 100 people in the country who died with a positive COVID test. And do you know how many people died of COVID in Australia between December 2020 and July 2021?
No, not offhand. One person died between December 2020 and July 2021. So a period of about 7 months, is that? 7 months, yeah. And is that proven with, like, from COVID or with COVID?
Actually, it was with COVID. He's actually a friend of a friend, and I think he was 96 and had comorbidities. So even that one death again is probably not even a death. But
it's
they're on type caution, say it was. That's still one death in 7 months.
Yeah.
Now you would think, obviously, you having first-hand experience working in that hospital, you've done the analytics on the PCR tests. You'd think that a normal person would probably walk down the middle of the street with a megaphone shouting it out, and I'm assuming that you did in some sort of way. Did anyone listen to you?
No. No. I tried to tell people, and they'd look at you blankly and go, "But people are dying."
Yeah, but you fast forward 2 years
Yeah.
now and they're still trying to tell people and they won't have a bar of it. They've had 3 vaccines and got COVID 3 times and they still won't listen.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we've got to do.
No, people don't want to listen to facts. They're too invested in the emotion. And because the media and the scare campaigns and the lies that were told, it's not just lies, it's misinformation, disinformation, things that they don't tell you, like the fact that the hospitals are empty, all contributes to this. I mean, this was so, if you don't think that this was planned by now, then there's something wrong with you, because every single country literally did exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. They all brought in social distancing within days of each other. I'm like, this wasn't like one country copying another. This was all being directed from somewhere. It's like, geez, who was directing it? Who could it possibly be? Who?
Yeah,
Who? Yes, who?
Jeff, look at the election results. You would think that people would flock to the minor parties. They didn't. So
No, because
they're still under the trance.
Yeah, they're still in a trance. They can't wake up to facts. They emote. They prefer emotions over thinking. Emotions have replaced thinking. People don't think anymore. They don't do research anymore. These are the same people who, they weren't listening to me, who was working in the hospital. I had, access to all the tests and, designed the reporting system. But, somebody who worked in a bar or, as a lawyer or whatever, they knew more than I did, apparently.
Yeah.
Right? They watch TV.
They said it on the news, right?
Yeah, they said it on the news, people are dying. And then it would be, but what about Italy? And but what about New York? And what about America? And it's
What
like,
about
well,
the video from China that started it all, where people were faking passing out in the street? People still believe that, do they?
And he's got a cigarette in his mouth.
And those are all fake. Right? One of those videos, you can actually see him. He sort of tips over like this, and at the very last second, he sticks his hand out.
Yeah,
stop himself.
You don't do that if you're dying.
And like half those videos, you couldn't tell what was going on. Like there was a person lying in the street with, blood pouring from his head. He probably had a bike accident.
Yeah.
It might have just been some people fooling around, going, "Hey, let's put some videos up and say there's a deadly virus out there." Who knows? It just got out of hand. But of course, the funny thing is, where are we seeing people just literally drop dead now? Like, it's funny, isn't it? There's lots of videos out there that are coming out now of people who are literally just standing there and going, and dropping dead.
Yeah.
With, heart attacks.
Oh, you mean the vaccine?
Death. That's a sudden adult death syndrome.
Yeah.
You're fine one day and dead the next.
Yeah. And throughout COVID, did we see a video anywhere else in the world of people just dropping dead? People don't die like that. Unless it's the only time you die like that or you fall over like that is stroke, heart attack. That's it.
Well, we've been taking our health advice from Kerry Chance, so everything should be good, right?
Yeah, that's the woman who never actually practiced medicine.
Ever.
She just went straight into admin.
And she has an interest in blood-borne viruses. That's her keynote. Interest in it.
The unbelievable thing about this is how many billions do we spend on healthcare, and we have how many thousands of people working for it, and that nobody thought at any point to go, maybe we should validate this test. Maybe we should see if we could get our own isolation of this virus rather than relying on code uploaded by the Chinese to an international database on January the 10th. I mean, have you ever heard of anything so stupid where you go, there's a pandemic because China, of all countries, have uploaded the genome to an international database? That makes it a pandemic. That makes it a virus. Did nobody think anywhere to go, maybe we should, see if this is a real thing and take some samples from somebody who apparently has this, and maybe we should validate this.
I said the same thing when I didn't understand why, when we first had it here, why did not the TGA with ADF quarantine people who were diagnosed with it, and isolate them, do bloods, and just try to isolate the problem anyway? Because I actually got the Freedom of Information response from TGA, and they didn't do any tests themselves. They said it's all on public record. Well, being Australia, and we, we invented the mechanical heart or something, back in the day, right? Why can't we test it ourselves?
Yeah, this is the same TGA.
Yeah,
it's the same. This is the same TGA that if you try and import, I don't know, some wildflower from the mountains of, the Ural Mountains or something in powder form, will come down on you like a ton of bricks if you try and sell it online. But they couldn't validate a test that was made before the genome had even been sequenced, and they couldn't get samples from sick people and then sequence it themselves and see if they could actually isolate the virus, which they still haven't done.
No, because the genome was sequenced using extrapolated data as well, wasn't it? I thought it's not the whole genome, a part of the genome, and then they added other bits of it to give it a definition.
Yes, and do you know what they then did is, like, when they released the code online to these international databases, they're called there's a couple of different ones, and you can go on there and you can do this thing called BLAST, which is really fun, where you get to splice different genomes and see and search for things and see where they appear. And anyway, you have to know what you're doing, I guess. But they uploaded this thing, and then what happened was there's various labs around the world that can reconstruct these viruses in their labs. So they downloaded this genomic code and then rebuilt the virus in their own labs, in America and London, Italy, wherever, to produce their own version of coronavirus so that they could make a vaccine for it. So is this a computer virus, or was it a real virus?
Well, they've never actually taken a blood sample from a human and been able to find it in the blood. Is that correct? Is that what we're getting to at this point?
Well, that's what they said. China said, look, we can't send samples of this because it would be breaking biomedical treaties, and it's too dangerous to send samples of this. So, we've uploaded the genome, and then all of these labs around the world, and this particularly now infamous one in North Carolina that was run by Ralph Barrett, were amongst the first to download the genome and then reconstruct or rebuild the virus from the code that China had uploaded to this international database.
It just sounds like Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
They made it out of frogs. Sorry, Rebecca. No, sorry, Rebecca, my fault.
Yeah, so how do they test for these different strains as well, Jeff? Suddenly overnight, it's like a new strain after they've found it.
Yeah, there isn't a test for different strains. It's complete BS. The machine, it's called a rotogene, and what it does is, there's lots of different things that it has to do. But at the end of the day, after it's done all the spinning and separating, and you've put all the chemicals and the dyes and the fluorescent things in there, the machine spits out a little piece of paper that says you're either COVID positive or not. So it's literally a little receipt about this big that says yes or no as to whether you're COVID positive. It doesn't say, oh, you've got Omega strain or whatever, or disease X strain or whatever.
You still get these people say, oh, I had Delta, I had, now they're saying I've got COVID and the flu at the same time. Intelligent people as well. They just say these things, and you just have to accept it. Like, what can you really say?
I just say bullshit. I just call bullshit on it.
Maybe I'm too polite or something. I'm not sure.
I've lost so many friends from calling them out on it, though. I just can't afford to lose any more friends on it.
I don't care. I don't have any friends anyway. So
you've made new friends now, Adam. More like-minded friends.
Yes. We have to be tough with these people, because I don't hold back on. I'm not polite to people anymore, because their stupid decisions. I suffer from the consequences of their stupid decisions. I've got a good mind to take my electricity bill and march up to some house in Warringah who have solar panels on the roof, and knock on the door and go, here you go, you can pay my bill because you caused it to go up, and you sell your cheap electricity that I subsidised with your subsidised solar panels, so you can pay my electricity bill, you thieving little spiv who voted for.
I've been saying the same thing to people now because I kind of also understand now how all that subsidizing kind of worked. And I said, so do you when I'm fitting blinds at people's houses, I said, do you have solar panels on your roof? And they go, no. And I said, but so you can thank Johnny next door who's got solar panels on his roof because he's getting cheap electricity because you're paying his bill.
Yeah, he's selling his surplus power back to the grid that you're now paying top dollar for, and he's got his own free electricity subsidised by you because, well, I mean, first of all, you're probably living in an apartment, and you know the people of Warringah, let me just call it Wartworth, which is Warringah and Wentworth together, Wartworth. Sorry again, Stephen. The people of Wartworth have got. Subsidized solar panels. And the worst thing is they're now going to do exactly the same thing with
the cars.
Yes. So they're now subsidizing not solar cars, battery cars, electric cars. And, they're giving them, and of course, subsidized means take money out of our pockets and make that $60,000, $50,000 electric car a bit cheaper for the people, the smug Denny's and hypocrite soy latte sipping Wartworth people who can afford that.
Charge it anywhere.
Sorry, well, yeah, no,
but
they're putting charging stations everywhere. Who's paying for that? We are, the taxpayer. And why?
And then they'll sell it off to another. They'll sell it off to an internationally foreign-owned company, and then we still have to pay to charge our cars up with it. So then we've paid for the construction of it, and then they're going to send the money overseas, and they're going to make all the money overseas.
Exactly, and that's exactly what happened with the desal plant that we didn't need. We spent $10 billion building it, and then they sold it, and half of it, I think, was bought by Canadian Teachers Retirement Fund. We still pay for that desal plant, so we are funding the retirement of Canadian teachers.
I worked on the Gold Coast one. That's where I first started surveying, and when we got there was this big, massive rush. Oh, we have to finish this thing on time because, Southeast Queensland's going to run out of water. Well, by August, I'd been there 3 months. It rained for about 2 weeks and flooded the whole job.
Was that 2010 with the Brisbane floods?
Well, yeah, it was a little bit before the Brisbane floods, but, they never used it. It got mothballed straight away. And we spent, 2 years building it. It was a great job. But, it was fantastic for my career, but the amount they spent $1.1 billion building it, and that was the cheapest one from all. It was $10 billion for 5 desal plants around the country that are not getting used. They're just sitting there, and they cost millions of dollars every year to upkeep them. But you can't blame me in Warringah. I voted for that One Nation bloke. Anyway.
The Warringah warrior.
But I think we are up against it, and one of the big problems, with the minor parties and the freedom movement and any resistance to any of these things we've been talking about, is that it's so fragmented. Is there any way, Jeff? Do you think we can form a unified front? Is it needed? Firstly, can we stay divided and use our preference discipline to kind of get us over the line, or do we need to somehow unify? And do you actually think that's possible?
I think unifying would be preferable. Is it possible? Maybe not with the egos involved, but that's really up to the candidates and the supporters. It's not up to the leaders of the parties. If the
I've been saying that all along. If it's going to happen, it's at the volunteer and candidate level.
All the candidates and supporters have to do is turn around and say, look, if you guys don't unify into one nice big freedom party, then we're not going to run and we're not going to help you. And then they don't have a party anymore. And that immediately gets rid of the egos. They would then have to sit in a room together and say, okay, well, we better somehow unify and, pick a leader or whatever, or whoever gets elected is the leader, and come to some kind of deal or arrangement, or just go into a sort of slightly less, informal written agreement where you support each other. And that did happen to an extent through this last election, which was good to see. And, the One Nation candidates were really, really good, exemplary almost at working with other candidates, the other freedom candidates. But there was also people who were trying to throw spanners in the works and cause disruption, which wasn't helpful. It's like, stop punching right, people. You know, it might not be perfect, but stop punching right. We're all in the same boat. We're all trying to save ourselves from the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, I would prefer it if they're unified. It would be great to have Clive's money and Pauline's leadership and you know the LDP's policies and other smaller great people like Michael O'Neill at IMOP and the people from the AFP and all those other minor parties getting in there and just saying, look, let's do this properly. Let's have pre-selections. We'll decide who's running where, and go and get them. You know, just make it a nice, simple platform of freedom and lower taxes and getting Australia back on the right track.
Yeah.
Oh, and
I feel like sorry, keep going.
Sorry, and one last thing, Nuremberg 2.0.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Mate.
and followed by global warming fraud 2.0. Well, 1.0. We haven't had 2.0 yet.
All right, so we've kept you quite a while. So we'll just, if you don't mind, keeping you a little bit longer, just to dive into some topics for the week.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. So we'll bring up this one because I think this will get a good reaction out of you. Let's play this lovely lady.
Oh dear.
As we confront the climate crisis, women and girls' human rights must be at the centre of our collective efforts. Climate change and its consequences can exacerbate the risk of sexual and gender-based violence. This risk is most acute for women and girls facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and inequality, including Indigenous women and girls. As we confront the climate crisis.
All right, so what do you think of that, Jeff?
Like, seriously, where do these people come from, and where do they get these insane ideas? Like, why do we not have a press anymore that would stand up and say, can you explain how climate change is going to cause?
I can tell you where she got it from.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now where she got it from.
I'd really appreciate a woman like that not
Economic
speaking on my
Forum.
behalf.
Oh, okay, yeah. Where do they get it from? Probably some paper written by some pink-haired weirdo at university that we've been paying for a PhD.
Isn't it funny how all this stuff comes back to the World Economic Forum?
Yeah, well...
Funny for some.
Yeah, I guess I was going to say it's not really that funny, but...
Poor choice of words. Yeah, well, basically...
I like your point. I like your point, Rebecca, about that you said. I'd like it that if that woman didn't speak for people like yourself.
Yes.
I would like to actually see in our comments other women saying, well, hey, yeah, I don't really feel that same way, or hey, wait a minute, I do feel the same way. I would like to just see what the people, like our audience, and even if they get their friends and stuff to even message on the cast once it goes up on the platforms. How they feel.
I love how they make blanket statements like that. I mean, as a woman, I've had a career for like 14 years. I can honestly say I've never been discriminated against in any of my, career or anything just for being a female.
Well, she says there's discrimination prone, and she's standing there as an ombudsman for women
and girls
as an under the Australian government. I mean, she's at almost a very top level.
I'd like to hear from Jacinta Price on her opinion on Indigenous women and girls and what they're truly going through. I think that's more of a better representation for that group than that woman.
Yeah. But seriously, I still want to know, how does climate change affect, it means that women are going to be at greater risk of, what was it?
Physical abuse and domestic violence.
And what was it, discrimination?
And discrimination.
They're basically saying because of all the climate change events.
What are they going to say? Oh, well, climate change makes it hotter, so therefore women are going to have to wear less clothes, so therefore they'll be discriminated against more. Oh, climate change makes it wetter, as well as hotter. So women are going to walking around in t-shirts, are going to be walking around with wet t-shirts. Like, where do they come up with this crap?
Or it's going to get windy, and the wind makes people angry, and then angry men are going to go and abuse women.
Well, that's what I was
It
going to
makes no
say,
sense.
actually. I was going to say men are going to get hot and bothered and start attacking us women, apparently.
Yeah, because the wind will blow up their skirts like Marilyn Monroe in...
Oh, my goodness.
Well, don't you know that climate change makes us have more full moons, and that sends people crazy? So
climate change makes more full moons. Yeah.
Here's one that I think kind of dovetails to what Jeff was talking about before. Pandemic babies with no immunity are ending up in intensive care across Australia with respiratory illnesses. So unfortunately, this is a very sad case that they're finding these pandemic babies. So how do you and I love it in here. One of the excuses that I found for this was they were saying that these babies have been growing up in lockdown and that thus have not been exposed to viruses, so they don't have immunity. Do you think that's the real cause?
It's probably one of the causes, and this is amazing that we know this. I mean, you know how the left go on about when you invaded this country and that country, you caused all these people to die out because they weren't used to the disease. It's like, well, hang on. So how come you didn't apply this to lockdowns where you were locking children away and destroying or weakening their immune systems? So that's probably part of it. I haven't read the article, but it could also be vaccinated mothers.
That's what I was going to say there, Jeff. They don't ask the question, was the mother vaccinated at what term of the pregnancy, this, that, the other. They don't ask it. They just don't ask that question.
They don't even mention it.
I heard something the other day. I was watching something the other day where the data is now starting to come in because it's been 9 months since people started to, or almost 12 months in some cases, where people have been vaccinated. So the first vaccinated or the first babies born to vaccinated mothers are now being born, or as is the case, not being born. There is a huge drop in babies being born. Apparently, it's something like a 14 sigma change. Hundreds, thousands of babies who are compared to the average 2 years ago who are not being born. Now, people might say, "Oh, that's because of the pandemic." You'd actually think there'd be more babies being born.
That's right.
Locked up.
Well, Stephen,
what's
your
husband and
wife
wife
had a
going to do?
baby
Locked
during
up?
the pandemic, yeah?
Yeah, I've got a pandemic.
And I had a baby during the pandemic as well, so yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah.
I had a baby during the pandemic as well.
There you go. There's three of us. It's definitely
You're
not
left
my
out.
fault.
No. I think my baby was conceived before the pandemic started, though.
Well, I can tell you a lot of people that I've worked with that were all pregnant at the same time, so there was no lack of reproducing during the pandemic.
So
we've got a couple of questions. Jemima on Instagram wants to ask Jeff, when do you think Australia will get a decent, community-minded, conservative government? Has this goal passed the realms of possibility?
After we've gone through an awful lot of pain and suffering, is the answer to that. I've got to be brutally honest, but it's almost good to be brutally honest. Australia, America, Canada, New Zealand, and United Kingdom are all now fascist countries. That might sound shocking to people. And
corporate fascism. No,
they're just plain. Doesn't really matter what flavour of fascism is. It's just we are fascist countries now. If you go back to say January 30th, 1933, when Hitler became chancellor, was appointed chancellor of Germany, the newspapers the next day didn't say Germany is now a fascist country. And after the Bolshevik Revolution in November 1917 in Russia, the newspapers the next day didn't say Russia is now a communist country. These things sort of came later after policies had been implemented and people actually saw what they were actually doing. So history's kind of written it happens all the time. Obviously, history, is happening now and is moving into the past, but history's almost written backwards. I think when we look back at this time, we will have to pick a point where we would say that Australia and all these other countries turned fascist. I would probably pick for now 17th of March 2020, which is when the first lockdowns came in. But again, people will go, we're not a fascist country. There's no people with wearing funny uniforms marching in the street. It's like, well, look, history, as Mark Twain said, it doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So if you look at fascism, what are the hallmarks of fascism? Well, rigged elections, got those in America, arresting the opposition, throwing them into prison without charge. Yeah, we've got that. That's happened here. Concentration camps. Oh, we've got those here.
Yeah.
Controlled media. Yeah, we have those here. Oppression against the people. Jackbooted thugs in the street. Medical tyranny. The medical tyranny throughout COVID was far worse than anything that was done to the German. Well, other than people who were in the death camps or the concentration camps.
Yeah.
Yeah, not even the Nazis did this to their own people. What are the other signs of fascism? Oh, a corporate fascism where you have big companies that are not private companies, they're corporations. And what's a corporation? Well, it's like the BBC and the ABC, both corporations. They're both things that are run or controlled in some way by the government, either through money or through regulations. And we have corporations that appear that they are private companies, but they're not. They're colluding with the government and working together to force policies and certain things on people. So you've got Big Pharma forcing their vaccines onto people. You've got Big Green, lots of different green companies out there forcing their crappy electricity that doesn't work and never doesn't generate to pay vast amounts of money for onto people. Lots of other examples like that. But all of these countries, I would say Canada's probably the number one fascist country, followed maybe by America, then New Zealand, then us, and the United Kingdom's probably the least of the fascist countries. But it's we are a fascist country, and that's the harsh reality we have to face up to, so that we know what we're fighting. And even when, again, going back to sort of Germany and the Soviet Union, in the early days, they still had elections and they still had people who could speak out. And, actually, funnily enough, the press in Germany in 1934 was probably freer than our press, who are now owned and controlled by the government, who handed hundreds of millions of dollars to them during the pandemic. And also other corporations like Google and YouTube, who gave money to Sky News, in case you didn't know that.
What was that? Say that again.
So Sky News, probably the last bastion of
freedom.
I wouldn't say freedom, but the last bastion.
Free speech, kind of free speech.
Balanced news.
Balanced news.
So you probably remember during the pandemic, they had a guest on who was an anti-vaxxer. And the next day or a couple of days later, YouTube banned their account. So you couldn't watch them. So what happened was Sky and YouTube, i.e. Google, went into negotiations, whatever that means. Anyway, these negotiations apparently resulted in Google giving Sky lots of money. I'm talking in the millions of dollars. I don't know how much, but apparently it was in the millions of dollars. Then the Sky News channel was reinstated on Sky, and thereafter, all you heard from Sky was pro-vaccine propaganda. You didn't hear there were no more anti-vaxxers, there was no more anti-vax propaganda. And not long after that, Alan Jones left not in mysterious circumstances. He told us why at the function. He was getting 3 letters a day from lawyers telling him what he could and couldn't say.
That's right.
And again, that's fascism. People telling you what you can and can't say. Tax on free speech and so on. We're living in a fascist country. Get used to it.
Well, we don't want to get used to it. That's why we're here.
We're going to
Yeah,
fight it back.
exactly. Overthrow it. Don't get used to it. Overthrow it.
Don't get used to it. Don't do that.
Not in our country, not in Australia. We have to definitely make a stand. But I think that we've run out of time for any more questions. But just quickly, question of my own. It can be a yes or no answer. When you were talking about climate change before, we didn't ask you, and this is something that we've been discussing a lot lately. What's your view of nuclear energy?
Well, I like it. I'm like, why do we need it? Everyone talks about nuclear. It's like, why don't we just use coal and gas and oil? There's nothing wrong with it. And even there's lots of options. We've got coal, gas, oil, fracking. We should definitely start fracking. Nuclear, small modular reactors are great. It takes a long time to build a nuclear power plant. It would, especially in this country. I think the Japanese can do it in 6 years, which means in this country it would take 18 years and $400 trillion because of all the union corruption and the government corruption around it. So, yeah, that's the problem. That's the only problem with nuclear is, try building it in this country. But no, as a power source, it's great. It's clean, cheap. But again, it's like, why are you even discussing nuclear? Because you're almost giving into the notion that there's a problem. There is no problem with CO2. There is no problem with carbon emissions. There is no problem with a warming environment because of a minuscule trace gas. So why are we even talking about nuclear? What's wrong with it? With coal plants, build some new HELE. That's high emission. High energy, low emission coal plants, coal-fired power plants, and put money into. Look, why have we put no money into the nuclear? I really like is nuclear fusion, which it doesn't work yet. But why have we not put money into that? So we put $1.5 trillion into solar panels and windmills and all of that.
And
crap.
windmills, yeah.
Why have we not put money into nuclear fusion? That's the sort of golden chalice of energy. That's free energy. We would never pay a power bill again.
Well, you can't have that.
I think that's your answer. That's your answer right there.
We've got to get it to work, of course, first. But the joke is it's always 20 years away. But we're smart people, or we were. We still have enough smart people left, I think, that can crack this. They're working on it in France and Korea and Japan, where they still have smart people.
Well, this has been a really great interview. We could probably have you. We'll probably have to have you back on because I feel like we've only scratched the surface. With your career and everything that you've kind of seen and done. So thank you very much for coming on. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to you. And just quickly again, where can we find your book? And will there be an audio version as well?
Oh,
people like me that don't like reading.
I haven't thought about that. I guess I could do one. Yeah, there'll be an ebook version and the paperback version. So if you go on Amazon, we'll probably
trigger warming.
Not warning. Trigger warming. That's the joke. Is that it's going to trigger people, but it's going to trigger the left definitely. But it's trigger.
Well, you definitely got the voice for an audio.
Yeah,
sure. The mic as well. I could actually make use of the mic that I spent $150 on years ago.
Well, I would definitely like the audio version because then I can listen to it while I'm working. But if not, I'll have to just read it page by page at night time. But I'll definitely get this book, and I'm looking forward to having a read of it.
You don't get the lovely pictures with the audio version. I mean, look at all these lovely pictures.
Yes, I'm keen on the pictures. I'm going to go for the hard copy.
Yeah, these pictures are great, and just copy them and take pictures of with your phone.
I'm going to plaster the neighbourhood with them.
Send to people because they flatten greenies in an instant because they haven't seen it.
I'm gonna make my kids read it so that when the schools start banging on about plastic this and you can't use that, then my kids and I know my middle daughter, she will turn around and go, but miss, my dad made me read this book and this is what happened, and she will just put it to her.
Here's the policy for your upcoming campaign, Adam. If you're elected, you're going to put that book in every classroom around New South Wales.
I already thought about that. It's not a new idea. I was thinking about it before. I'm like, how do we get that as part of the prescribed reading you know how
The
they have that,
curriculum.
the curriculum of reading. They've got a certain amount of books they have to read. That should be on one of them
That's
instead of
balance.
gender fluidity.
If
that's
they
the kind of
have
things
to
we need
watch,
to do.
if they have to watch, what is it, An Inconvenient Truth, then the other side is they should also be given 2 hours reading time of, you know, doesn't matter whether it is with trigger warning. How old's your daughter, Adam?
She's 11.
11. I think she could manage this, you know.
I'm going to make it read it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. I'll make them read it. They're all going to get one. They're getting that and the Barefoot Investor. They're going to get one of those books each.
Not only that, buy a whole bunch of copies and put them in your local library, and you know,
Yeah,
you know how they got a lot of them in Moringa, those little community
Yes.
little libraries on the corner of a street. Like buy one and put one in there. Just, you know, get the
well,
word out.
don't buy one
I
because
think
you
we
already
need
paid
to
for the
start doing
libraries. You go to the library and ask them to order it because you already paid for you're already paying tax money for the library. They have to, if you go in there and say, "Can you order this book?" They've got to order it.
Okay,
It's
well
your
there you
money.
go.
Yeah,
There you go.
That's awesome.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Is there anything else you need to say before we go, or where can we find you? Is there any way we can follow you on social media or anywhere?
I am not a big social media person. I think I have a Facebook account, but I'm one of those people that just doesn't. I'm in IT, but I just don't do social media. I don't know why. I just don't like it. It's I think it's one of the worst things to happen to humanity. It's made our society so disgustingly narcissistic and self-centered, and it's all about me, and getting likes, and I think it's been one of the worst things. It was great when it started, when it started out, but it's horrible. I just think it's really one of the worst. I prefer to talk to people face to face. So yeah, I do have a Facebook account, but I don't post anything there, so it's pointless following me. People don't care what you have for dinner.
Well, just keep us updated anyway. We can always plug something, or we can always just, you know, let people know that, remember that Jeff Grimshaw, he was on, well, he's up to this now, or go, this is his book, it's been released, or whatever you want. Just drop us a line and we'll spread the word for you.
Thank you very much.
That's all right.
And it's been great seeing you guys again, and great being on your show.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, well, thanks a lot, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Definitely have you back on.
All right. Thanks all.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.